They can't sleep at night, not because you're gone, but because silence finally started talking. You were the routine, the advantage, the invisible safety net they never thanked. Now the nights are long, the thoughts are loud, and regret keeps tapping on their skull. They laughed when you walked away. Funny thing is, laughter doesn't echo well at 3 a.m. Losing you didn't hurt at first. It destroyed them slowly, one restless night at a time. Your absence didn't scream at them. It didn't need to. It sat quietly in the room where you used to exist and let their minds do the damage. At first, it felt like freedom to them. No responsibility, no pressure, no mirror reminding them who they really were. They thought losing you was a win. Like cutting loose a weight they never understood was holding the whole structure together. They smiled. They joked about it. They told themselves stories where you were replaceable, forgettable, temporary. That's the funny part. Stories are comforting until reality edits them. Then the cracks started showing up in small, embarrassing ways. Things stopped working the way they used to. Energy felt off. Timing got sloppy. Luck suddenly had conditions. The silence you left behind wasn't empty. It was crowded with all the things you used to handle without applause. They tried filling the gap with noise, with people, with distractions, but nothing fit quite right. Everything felt like a bad impersonation, a cheap knockoff pretending to be enough. Nights became uncomfortable, not dramatic at first, just restless. Just that irritating feeling of something missing they couldn't name without admitting your importance. That's when absence stopped being neutral and started becoming personal. Your absence remembered everything they tried to forget, every shortcut they took, every time they leaned on you without respect, every moment they assumed you'd always be there. Because you always were. Funny how permanence only gets questioned after it disappears. They replay conversations now. Not the ones where they were kind. The ones where they were careless. Words they threw around like they didn't matter suddenly weigh a ton in the dark. Your absence has a better memory than they do. It brings receipts. It whispers, "This is what you lost," without raising its voice. No insults needed. No revenge planned. Just truth sitting there, smiling politely while it ruins their comfort. They look for you in replacements, in situations, in patterns that almost feel familiar. Almost. But almost is a cruel word. Almost reminds them that what they had was specific, precise, rare, and gone. That's when frustration turns inward, not anger at you, anger at themselves. Because blaming you would mean you still mattered in a way they could control. But you don't. Your absence isn't chasing them. It's letting them chase the version of life that worked better when you were in it. You became the punishment without lifting a finger. No speeches. No confrontations. No dramatic exits. Just gone. And that's what breaks them. Because they can't argue with nothing. They can't negotiate with silence. They can't manipulate an empty space that refuses to respond. Your absence doesn't need justice. It doesn't need closure. It doesn't even need to be acknowledged. It just exists, calmly undoing everything they thought was stable, smiling in the corner, while they realized too late that losing you wasn't a moment. It was a process. Slow, humiliating, relentless, unfolding every day they wake up and notice that life feels heavier, messier, less forgiving, and somehow quieter without you standing there holding it together like it was nothing. Silence isn't empty. It never was. Silence is where truth stretches its legs and starts pacing. When the noise fades, when distractions lose their grip, that's when regret clears its throat. During the day, they keep it together, wear the right expressions, laugh at the right moments, pretend nothing changed. Daylight is generous like that. It lets people lie to themselves. But night has no patience for pretend. At night, there's no audience to impress, no reactions to manage, no one to distract them from the thoughts they've been dodging all day. That's when silence starts asking questions they don't want to answer. Simple ones, obvious ones, the kind that don't need volume to hurt. Why did I treat them like that? Why did I assume they'd stay? Why did I think I had more time? Silence doesn't rush. It waits until they're tired enough to stop fighting back. Regret doesn't arrive dramatically. It seeps in through the cracks. A memory here, a sentence there, a moment replayed differently than before. Things they laughed off suddenly feel sharp. Jokes sound cruel when echoed back with no laughter attached. Silence strips context. It removes excuses. All that's left is intention, and intention is hard to defend when no one else is around to believe the lie with you. They try to fill the quiet. Phones, music, scrolling, anything to keep the mind occupied. But silence is patient. It knows the battery dies. It knows the song ends. It knows eventually the screen goes dark, and they're left with themselves. That's when regret leans in close, not shouting, just smiling, letting them connect dots they've been avoiding. This is where you went wrong. This is where you should have spoken. This is where you chose comfort over respect. Funny thing about regret, it doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't care how busy you were, how stressed you felt, how justified you thought you were at the time. Regret only cares about outcomes, and the outcome is quiet now. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes small sounds feel loud. A ticking clock. A breath held too long. A thought that won't let go once it grabs on. They tell themselves they've moved on. That it's fine. That it didn't matter as much as it feels like it does now. Silence lets them finish the sentence before reminding them how much effort it takes to keep saying that. If it truly didn't matter, they wouldn't need to convince themselves every night. Regret wouldn't keep showing up uninvited if it had nothing to say. Silence becomes a mirror they can't turn away from. It reflects who they were when they had you and who they are now without you. The difference is uncomfortable. The contrast is loud even without sound. And that's the joke of it all. The loudest consequences don't come with noise. They come when everything goes quiet, and there's nowhere left to run, nowhere to hide, nothing to distract them from the truth that losing you wasn't just a loss of a person. It was the loss of peace, of ease, of a version of life that didn't demand this many sleepless nights just to keep the regret from speaking up again. They didn't misjudge you loudly. That would have required attention, effort, awareness. No, they misjudged you casually, like people do when they think they've already figured you out. They saw what you gave, not what it cost you. They saw consistency and mistook it for weakness. Reliability looked boring to them. Loyalty felt predictable. Calm felt controllable. You made things work, so they assumed things worked because of them. That's how underestimation begins. Not with disrespect, but with comfort. Comfort breeds laziness. Laziness breeds blindness. They stopped paying attention to the details that actually mattered. The timing you fixed. The chaos you absorbed. The messes that never reached them because you stood in the way like a buffer. They thought the peace was natural, like gravity, like it would exist no matter what. You were just part of the background, like lighting people only notice when it fails. They reduced you to a role they could manage, a function, a convenience, something useful but not essential. That's the mistake. Essential things don't announce themselves. They don't beg to be seen. They quietly hold everything together until one day they're gone and the whole structure starts making unfamiliar noises. Creaking, shifting, collapsing slowly enough to be confusing. When you left, they expected inconvenience, temporary discomfort, a phase. They thought they'd adapt quickly, replace you easily, move forward without missing a step. That's what happens when someone underestimates depth. They confuse surface familiarity with full understanding. They never bothered to look beneath because they thought they already knew what was there. Reality corrected them gently at first. Little failures, missed opportunities, situations that used to resolve themselves suddenly requiring effort. They blamed timing, bad luck, other people, anything except the obvious. Admitting your value would mean admitting their mistake, and pride hates clarity. Pride prefers denial. It whispers that things will settle, that the problem is temporary, that you weren't that important anyway. But patterns don't lie. The same problems kept repeating. The same gaps kept showing up. The same absence kept being felt in moments where stress used to stop short of becoming chaos. That's when confusion turns into irritation. They start asking why things feel harder now, why outcomes aren't the same, why progress feels slower, why peace feels fragile. They look back at you differently now, not with appreciation, but with calculation, trying to measure what they lost, trying to quantify something they never took the time to understand. That's the cruel part. Value makes sense only after it's gone. Before that, it just feels normal, expected, underwhelming. They underestimated you because you didn't need credit to function. You didn't demand recognition to contribute. You didn't make noise about the weight you carried. Underestimation always backfires because it's built on assumptions instead of observation. They assumed you needed them more than they needed you. Assumed your patience was endless. Assumed your presence was guaranteed. Assumed wrong. And now every assumption costs them something. Stability, confidence, control, sleep. They replay moments now with new eyes. Things you said that didn't register before. Warnings disguised as calm statements. Boundaries mistaken for flexibility. Strength mistaken for tolerance. You weren't quiet because you were weak. You were quiet because you were deciding. And decisions made in silence tend to be final. Now they know your value, but knowledge without access is just frustration. Awareness without repair is just regret wearing glasses. They underestimated you, and in doing so, overestimated themselves. They thought they were the source. Turns out, they were the beneficiary. And the joke is, you didn't leave to teach them a lesson. You left because you already learned one. Peace didn't arrive for you with fireworks. It slipped in quietly the moment you stopped explaining yourself. The moment you stopped proving, fixing, compensating, shrinking. Chaos didn't follow you when you left. It stayed behind, loyal to the people who created it. Funny how that works. You walked away lighter, not because life got easier, but because the weight was never yours to carry in the first place. They felt it immediately, not as loss, but as disruption. Things started demanding attention. Problems stopped resolving themselves. Emotions they outsourced to you bounced back unfinished. You had been the filter, the buffer, the pause between impulse and consequence. Without you, everything hit at once. That's when chaos realized it no longer had a mediator. Your peace looks boring from the outside. Calm routines, clear boundaries, no dramatic reactions, no unnecessary access. That kind of peace terrifies people who survive on noise. They don't trust silence unless it's broken. They don't understand calm unless it's earned through destruction. So when you stopped reacting, stopped chasing, stopped engaging, they panicked. Because chaos feeds on response, and you starved it. They tried pulling you back into the mess. Subtle at first, familiar patterns, emotional hooks disguised as nostalgia. When that didn't work, irritation crept in. Your calm felt insulting, like you were cheating the system, like you skipped the punishment. They expected you to suffer for leaving. They thought you'd struggle, that you'd miss the dysfunction, that you'd come back to restore balance. But balance without boundaries is just organized chaos, and you already graduated from that circus. Chaos hates being ignored. It needs witnesses. It needs participants. It needs someone to blame when things go wrong. Without you, it turned inward. Arguments got louder. Tensions escalated faster. Small problems became big ones, because there was no one left to soften the edges. You were never the problem. You were the delay, the cushion, the reason things didn't explode sooner. Your peace didn't fix you. It revealed you. Revealed how much energy you'd been spending managing other people's instability. Revealed how clear your mind could be when it wasn't constantly interrupted by emergencies that weren't yours. You didn't become cold. You became selective. You didn't disappear. You became unavailable to nonsense. Meanwhile, chaos kept multiplying where you left it. Same patterns, same cycles, different day. They talk about you now, not because they miss you, but because your absence changed the temperature. You were the calm center they never acknowledged, and now the storm has no eye. Everything spins faster without direction, louder without resolution. You sleep better now, not because life is perfect, but because your conscience is quiet. Chaos doesn't let people rest. It keeps them alert, reactive, exhausted. Peace lets you breathe between thoughts. It gives you space to hear yourself again. And that's dangerous for people who benefited from your silence. They call it abandonment. You call it survival. They call it distance. You call it clarity. They say you changed. Of course you did. You stopped negotiating with chaos and chose a seat far enough away to watch it collapse under its own weight, calmly, steadily, without reaching out to save it again.